My name is Morgan Ingram. I'm 17 years old. 3 months ago, my stepmother sat me down at the kitchen table and told me to sign over the $400,000 my dead mother left me. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, and said, "She's your family now. Your mother would have wanted this." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I said nothing. The next morning, I handed them a sealed envelope from my mom's lawyer. What was inside that envelope made my father cry for the first time in his life. Not because of the money, because of what my mother wrote about him. Words she'd kept sealed for years, waiting for the exact moment he'd need to hear them. Before we get into what happened, if this story speaks to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. And I'd love to know. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are now. Let me take you back 6 months to the day my mother closed her eyes for the last time. My mother died on a Tuesday. The sun was out. I remember hating it for that. Her name was Claire Ingram. She was 43, a 4th grade teacher at Millbrook Elementary for 16 years. The kind of teacher who stayed late cutting construction paper, who bought winter coats for kids whose parents couldn't. She taught me to read before kindergarten. She taught me to write thank you cards by hand. She taught me that silence sometimes is the loudest thing you can say. The cancer came 2 years before the Tuesday. Lung cancer, stage 3. She never smoked a day in her life. The doctor said it happens. She said, then we deal with it. And she did. For 23 months, she dealt with it. Chemo on Thursdays, teaching on Mondays through Wednesdays, grading papers on her hospital bed with an IV drip in her left, arm and a red pen in her right. I'd sit beside her doing homework, pretending I couldn't hear the machines beeping. The last week, she could barely talk, but she pulled me close. Her hands so thin I could feel every bone, and whispered something I didn't fully understand. Everything you need is with Drayton. Promise me you'll call her. I didn't know who Drayton was. I didn't know what everything meant. I just held her hand and said, I promise, Mom. She smiled. It was small and tired and perfect. And then on a Tuesday afternoon in October, with the sun pouring through the window like it had no respect for what was happening in that room, she let go. I was the only one there. My father hadn't visited once in 2 years. Not when she was diagnosed. Not when she lost her hair. Not when she sold her house to pay the deductibles. Not once. The nurses cried more than I did. Mrs. Patterson from across the street brought flowers to a room that no longer needed them. My Aunt June drove 3 hours from Culpeper and held me in the hospital hallway while I shook. My father sent a text the next day. Sorry for your loss, like I was a coworker. Like she was someone he'd met at a party once. That part matters. You'll see why the funeral was small. Mom's friends from school, a few neighbors, my Aunt June, Mom's younger sister, and me. My father showed up 20 minutes late wearing a tie I'd never seen. He brought Valerie Hartwell, his wife of 6 years. The woman he married 14 months after walking out on my mother and me. She wore a black dress and an expression that said she'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't sign the guest book. Here's what you need to know about me at 17. I had nowhere to go. In the state of Virginia, a minor needs a legal guardian. My Aunt June applied. The court said no. My biological father had priority. Richard Ingram, 45, employed, married with a 3-bedroom house in Grover, Virginia, so I packed 2 suitcases and moved in with a man I'd barely spoken to in 8 years. The house was already full. Richard and Valerie had the master. Brianna, Valerie's daughter, 16, had the 2nd bedroom. Kyle, Valerie's son, 14, had the 3rd. My room was the converted storage space at the end of the hall, a camp cot, a folding table, and a bare bulb overhead. My suitcases didn't fit. I stacked them in the corner and sat on the cot listening to Kyle's video game bleeding through the wall. That first night, I heard Valerie in the kitchen. She wasn't talking to my father. She was talking about me. How long until the trust thing gets sorted? My father said something I couldn't hear. Then Valerie, she's been here 2 days, and she already acts like she owns the place. I pulled my mother's blanket around my shoulders. I didn't cry. I just memorized the sentence. People tell you who they are early. You should believe them. 1 week in, dinner. Valerie made chicken casserole and served everyone before me. I didn't mention it. I ate what was left in the dish and washed my own plate. Halfway through the meal, Valerie started talking about money. She didn't look at me. She looked at Richard. Brianna's first choice school costs $55,000 a year. The roof's leaking again. The Honda needs a transmission and my visa bill. Don't even get me started, Richard chewed slowly. Then he turned to me. His voice was careful, rehearsed. Your mom, she left you some money, right? We should probably talk about that as a family. I set my fork down. It's in a trust. I don't have access yet. Valerie leaned forward. Trusts can be changed. We looked it up. She said we. That meant this wasn't a dinner conversation. It was a coordinated ask. They'd been discussing it. Maybe for days. Maybe since before I moved in. Maybe since the funeral. I picked up my plate, walked to the sink, rinsed it, dried it, put it away. Morgan, Richard said, we're talking to you. Heard you, I said. I just don't have anything else to say. I went to my room, sat on the cot, opened the small wooden box I'd brought from Mom's house. Inside her reading glasses, a birthday card she'd written me when I turned 15, and a folded piece of paper with a phone number. The name next to it in my mother's handwriting, Patricia Drayton, Esquire. I didn't call that night. I didn't know yet how bad things would get, but I ran my thumb over the ink and thought, Mom, what did you know that I don't? Turns out everything. 2 weeks later, I came downstairs for breakfast and found a stack of papers on the kitchen table. The top page was highlighted in yellow. The header read, Petition for Guardianship of a Minor's Estate, Commonwealth of Virginia. Valerie was pouring coffee. She didn't look up. I picked up the papers. Read the first paragraph. Read it again. Richard walked in dressed for work. He saw me holding the petition and cleared his throat. It's just paperwork, he said. Standard stuff. If I'm your legal guardian, I should have a say in your finances. It's for your own good, Morgan. I stared at him. You want to control Mom's trust? I want to protect you. Grabbed his keys. You're 17. You don't understand how money works. Mom understood, I said. That's why she set it up. He left for work. Valerie sipped her coffee and smiled at me over the rim. It was the kind of smile that said, this is already decided. I went to the library after school, not for my shift, for the back room where it's quiet and the Wi-Fi works. I sat in the corner and called the one person I hadn't been able to face since the funeral. Aunt June picked up on the first ring. Honey, I've been waiting for this call. They're filing for guardianship of Mom's estate, I said. My voice cracked. First time since the funeral. June was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, can you get to my place Saturday? Yes. Good. There's someone you need to meet. Her name is Patricia Drayton, your mother's attorney. My chest loosened for the first time in weeks. My mother had whispered a name on her deathbed, and now that name was becoming real. Ms. Patricia Drayton's office sat above a hardware store on Main Street in Culpeper. Small town, small building, small sign, but the woman behind the desk was anything but small. She was 58, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain. And she looked at me the way a person looks at someone they've been expecting for a long time. Sit down, Morgan. Your mother told me a great deal about you. Aunt June sat beside me. Drayton opened a folder, thick, tabbed, organized. Your mother established an irrevocable trust 18 months before she passed. She named me as trustee. You are the sole beneficiary. She paused. Do you understand what irrevocable means? It can't be changed. Correct. Not by your father, not by his wife, not by any court petition for guardianship, because the trust already has a designated trustee, me. I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. The trust held $400,000, $250,000 from Mom's life insurance, $95,000 from her savings, and $55,000 from the sale of our house. She'd sold the house 6 months before she died and moved us into a rental. At the time, I thought she was downsizing because of medical bills. Now I understood she was building a wall. Drayton reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper. My mother's handwriting on the front, for Richard, when the time comes. Your mother gave me this with specific instructions, Drayton said. She asked that you deliver it to your father, but only when the moment is right. You'll know when. I held the envelope. It was warm, like it had been waiting. Your mother didn't hope for the best, Morgan. She planned for the worst, and she was right. I came home that evening and found my things in the garage. Not all of them, just the personal ones. The box of Mom's photographs. Her favorite coffee mug. The one with the chipped handle that she refused to throw out. My journal. The bracelet she wore every day for 20 years. A thin silver chain with a tiny locket. All of it stuffed into a black trash bag sitting on the concrete floor. Next to a bag of lawn clippings, Kyle was in the living room playing his game. Valerie was folding laundry on the couch. I stood in the doorway holding the trash bag. Where's my stuff? Valerie didn't look up. We needed the space. Kyle needs a gaming room. This is my mother's jewelry, her photos. And this is my house. You're living here rent-free. The least you can do is not take up space. I opened the bag, found the bracelet tangled in a scarf. The locket was open. Inside, a picture of me at age 4 sitting on Mom's lap. The photo was damp. Something had leaked on it. I closed the locket, put the bracelet on my wrist, felt the clasp click into place. You can take my room, I said, and my voice was very steady. You can take my chair at the table, but you don't get to throw my mother in the trash. Valerie looked at me for the first time. Something flickered in her face. Surprise? Maybe? Or a recognition that she'd finally found the line she shouldn't have crossed. She went back to folding. Kyle walked past the garage on his way to the kitchen and saw me kneeling on the concrete, sorting through the bag. He slowed down but didn't say anything. Even he knew, I think, that this particular moment wasn't funny. That night, I spread the photos on my camp cot and separated the water-damaged ones from the ones that survived. 11 photos were ruined, edges curled, colors bleeding. The rest I sealed in a gallon Ziploc bag and hid inside my suitcase. I wore the bracelet from that night forward, slept in it, showered in it. I wasn't taking it off until I was somewhere safe. I texted Aunt June. They threw out Mom's things. I need to get out of here. June replied in 30 seconds. 7 months, honey. You turn 18 in 7 months. We'll get you through this. 7 months. I started counting. The confrontation came on a Thursday. Richard called me into the living room after dinner. Valerie was on the couch, arms crossed, legs crossed, jaw set. She'd been building to this. I could tell by the way she'd barely spoken at dinner, storing her energy for the main event. Sit down, Morgan. I sat. We need that money, Richard said. Brianna's college, the roof. Your stepmother's been carrying this family on her back and we're drowning. That money isn't mine to give, I said. It's in a trust. It's your trust. You can talk to the lawyer. Tell her to release it. No. Valerie uncrossed her arms. Your mother wouldn't want you to be this selfish. I looked at her, then at my father. You don't get to tell me what Mom wanted. You left her. The room went very still. Richard's face changed. Not anger exactly, but something older. Shame, dressed up as authority. I'm still your father. Then act like one. Silence. Shoe seconds. 15 Valerie broke it. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. No respect, no gratitude. We feed her, house her, and she sits there like a little queen on a pile of money. Richard rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. If you can't be part of this family, Morgan, maybe this isn't the right home for you. There it was, the threat. Cooperate or we throw you out. A 17-year-old girl with nowhere to go, I stood up. My hands were trembling, but I kept them at my sides. You left Mom when she was healthy. You didn't come back when she was dying. and now you want her money. I walked to my room and closed the door quietly, the way my mother would have. The phone campaign started the next day. Valerie called Richard's mother, Grandma Shirley, then Aunt Linda, Richard's older sister, then Uncle Dean, his younger brother. She told each of them a version of the same story. Morgan is sitting on a fortune while the family struggles. She refuses to help. She's ungrateful. She's turning into her mother. That last part was supposed to be an insult. It was the highest compliment anyone could give me. Grandma Shirley called first. Morgan, your father is feeding you and putting a roof over your head. The least you can do is help out. Hi, Grandma. The money is in a trust. I legally can't access it. Then untrust it. Talk to the lawyer. That's not how it works. Your mother raised you better than this. She'd be ashamed. I held the phone away from my ear, let the words float past me. Then I said, I love you, Grandma. I have to go, Aunt Linda texted. Don't be that kid, Morgan. Family helps family. I didn't respond. Uncle Dean didn't call. He didn't text. I thought that was strange at the time. Everyone else in the family had weighed in, pressured, advised, judged. Dean stayed quiet. I didn't know yet that silence was its own kind of message. I started spending my afternoons at the library. Not just for my shift shelving books 3 days a week, but for the quiet. The back room had a table by the window where nobody bothered me. Mrs. Cooper, the head librarian, had known my mother. They'd worked together on the elementary school reading program. She never asked questions. She just left the back room unlocked after hours and pretended. She didn't notice me still there. I'd sit at that table doing homework, watching the parking lot empty out, listening to the building settle. Sometimes I'd write in my journal new entries since the old ones were water damaged. I wrote letters to Mom that I'd never send, telling her about Valerie and the kitchen table and the phone calls from Grandma. I wrote them like she could read them. Maybe she could. That library became the only place where no one asked me for anything. No one told me I owed them. No one invoked my dead mother's name to justify taking what she left me. I was 17, alone, and surrounded, and I was running out of room to breathe. Kyle made it personal. He was 14, built like his mother's temper. Short fuse, big noise. He'd already taken my charger, borrowed my headphones without asking, and changed the Wi-Fi password twice. I bought a new charger. I let the headphones go. I asked Brianna for the password, but the journal was different. I came home from the library and found it on the kitchen counter, pages open, damp. A glass of water had been tipped over right onto the pages where I'd written letters to my mom. Letters I never sent. Letters I wrote in the dark on my camp cot saying the things I couldn't say out loud. Kyle was at the table eating chips. Oops, he said. He didn't look up. I picked up the journal, peeled apart the wet pages. Some of the ink had bled. Some of the words were gone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I took the journal to my room, photographed every page with my phone, and saved them to a cloud folder. Then I put the journal in a Ziploc bag inside my suitcase. That evening, Kyle had friends over. They were in the living room, and as I passed through to the kitchen, Kyle pointed at me. That's our charity case. Her mom died, and now she lives in the closet. His friends laughed. I kept walking. Later, I was in my room with the door cracked when I heard a knock. Brianna stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself. I'm sorry about Kyle, she whispered. He's a jerk. It's not your fault. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded and left. My mother survived 2 years of chemotherapy without complaining once. I could survive a 14-year-old with a water glass. Okay, I need to pause here for a second because right now, looking back, I keep asking myself, would it have been easier to just hand over the money, walk away from all of it, and start fresh? I want you to tell me in the comments, have you ever been pressured by your own family to give up something a loved one left specifically for you? Because at this point in my story, I had no idea what was coming next. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. We're about to get to the part that changed everything. Saturday morning, Aunt June's kitchen, coffee, toast, and the truth. June is 39, a nurse at Culpeper Regional Hospital. She has my mother's eyes, dark brown, steady, the kind that don't flinch. She'd taken a double shift the night before, but still got up early to make breakfast. "Your mom started the trust right after the diagnosis," June said, pouring cream into her mug. 18 months before she died, she sat at my kitchen table, this table, the legal pad, and a list of everything she owned. Why didn't she tell me? "You were 15, Morgan. She didn't want you carrying that weight." June set down her mug. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Richard will remarry, and whoever he picks will come for this money. I know him." I looked at my hands. My mother's bracelet caught the light. "She didn't hate your father," June said softly. "She just understood him. She knew he was weak. She knew he'd convince himself that sharing was the right thing. And she knew he'd let someone else make the decision for him. So she made the decision first." "Exactly." June reached across the table and held my hand. "Your mom wrote 3 letters. One for you, Ms. Drayton already gave you that. One for Richard. That's the sealed envelope. And one for Drayton herself with instructions. Legal ones. What to do if Richard petitioned the court. What to do if someone tried to impersonate your guardian. What to do if things got ugly." June paused. "Your mom spent her last year planning for your future. Not hers. Yours." I squeezed her hand. Outside the window, birds were singing. It sounded like something my mother would have pointed out. I found the proof on a Monday. I was looking for a pen in the kitchen drawer, the junk drawer, where Valerie kept takeout menus and old batteries and apparently banking correspondence. The letter was from First National Trust Services. It was addressed to the office of Patricia Drayton, but a copy had been sent to the household. Standard procedure for any inquiry related to a minor's account. The letter stated that a request had been received from Valerie Ingram, legal guardian of Morgan Ingram, asking for a full account summary and withdrawal procedures for the trust. The request was denied. The letter cited the trust agreement. All inquiries must go through the designated trustee. Valerie had called the bank. She'd identified herself as my legal guardian. She'd tried to access my mother's trust. My hands didn't shake. I felt something colder than anger. Clarity. I photographed the letter with my phone. Both sides, the envelope too, with the postmark and the address. Then I put it back in the drawer exactly where I found it. That evening, I emailed the photos to Ms. Drayton with a single line. She called the bank pretending to be my guardian. Drayton responded within the hour. "This is exactly what your mother anticipated. I've documented everything. Keep the original in the drawer. Don't let them know you've seen it." And a second message. "I'm going to arrange a meeting. Your father and his wife need to hear the legal reality directly from me. It's time." I closed my phone and looked out the window. Valerie was in the backyard laughing at something on her phone. She had no idea what she'd set in motion. My mother had anticipated this exact move. She'd written instructions for it. Every single step. The Sunday dinner at Grandma Shirley's house was Valerie's grand performance. Everyone was there. Shirley at the head of the table, Aunt Linda and her husband Gary, Uncle Dean, quiet as always, Richard, Valerie, Brianna, Kyle, and me sitting at the corner closest to the door. The meal was pot roast and potatoes. Small talk lasted 12 minutes. Then Valerie set down her fork, pressed a tissue to her eye, and began, "I've tried so hard." Her voice cracked on cue. "I've opened my home to Morgan. I've treated her like my own, but she refuses to be part of this family." Linda looked at me with that expression, pity laced with judgment. Valerie continued, "She's sitting on money her dead mother left while we struggled to put food on the table. Richard works 60 hours a week. I gave up my career for these kids. And Morgan won't even help with college for Brianna." Grandma Shirley set down her knife. "Morgan, your father has done everything for you. Don't you think it's time to give back?" I held my fork. My mother's bracelet pressed against my wrist. Linda leaned in. "Claire would have wanted you to help your siblings. They are your siblings now. No one at that table had been to my mother's funeral except me and my father. Not Shirley, not Linda, not Dean. They hadn't sent flowers. They hadn't called. They'd never met Claire. Or if they had, it was once years ago at a barbecue they didn't remember. And now they were telling me what my mother would have wanted. I looked around the table. Pot roast going cold on 8 plates. A family portrait on the wall behind Shirley. Richard at 12, Linda at 15, Dean at 8. No picture of me. I'd never been to this house before 3 months ago. Valerie dabbed her tissue and looked at me with an expression of wounded nobility. Richard studied his plate. Brianna stared at the salt shaker. Kyle was texting under the table. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, a voice came from the far end of the table. Uncle Dean, who hadn't said a word all evening, set down his glass. Has anyone at this table actually seen the trust documents? The room went silent. Valerie's tissue froze at her cheek. Shirley's fork hovered in midair. Richard looked at his brother like Dean had just pulled the fire alarm. "'Cause I have questions," Dean continued. "And I think we should have answers before we start telling a 17-year-old what to do with her dead mother's estate." Nobody responded. The clock in the hallway ticked 5 times before. Shirley cleared her throat and changed the subject to Aunt Linda's bathroom renovation, but the damage was done. A crack had opened in Valerie's performance, and everyone at that table felt it. Dean found me in the driveway after dinner, leaning against Aunt June's car, waiting for the ride I'd arranged in advance. I'd learned to always have an exit plan. "Morgan, hold on a second." Dean was 40, the youngest of the 3 Ingram siblings. He worked as an accountant at a firm in Fredericksburg. He was the quiet one, the one who showed up to family dinners, ate his food, and left without drama. I barely knew him. "I don't know exactly what your mom set up," he said, hands in his jacket pockets, "but I know trusts. If it's irrevocable and has an independent trustee, they can't touch it. No petition, no guardianship filing, nothing." I watched his face. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked back at the house. The kitchen light was on, and through the window I could see Valerie gesturing while Shirley nodded. "Because Richard called me last week. He asked me to help him find a way into the trust. Wanted me to look at the structure, find a loophole." "What did you say?" I said no. He met my eyes. That's when I knew something was really wrong. "Your brother, my brother, asked me to help him take his daughter's inheritance." I told him no, that's not who we are. I nodded. My throat felt tight. "If your mom had a lawyer, use that lawyer," Dean said. "And don't sign anything. Not a single page. Nothing. I won't." He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. Quick, awkward, the way men do when they don't know how to say something bigger. Then he walked back to his truck. I stood in the driveway for a long time after he drove away. One person in that entire family had said no. Sometimes one is enough. Valerie played her last card on a Wednesday afternoon. I was doing homework at the folding table in my room when Brianna knocked. She stood in the doorway looking like she'd rather swallow glass than say what she was about to say. "Can I talk to you?" "Sure." She sat on the edge of my cot. Her hands were clasped between her knees and she wouldn't look at me. "My mom says she started again. Morgan, if you don't share the money, I can't go to college. I'll have to work at the diner. Is that what you want?" The words sounded rehearsed. I could almost hear Valerie feeding them to her from the hallway. "Brianna, that's not your fault. And it's not mine either." Her eyes filled. "I know, she told me to say it." I know she did. Brianna wiped her face and left without another word. I heard her bedroom door close softly. 30 seconds later, Valerie appeared. She'd been listening. Her face was triumphant and furious at the same time. "See what you've done? You made her cry. You're heartless. You're just as cold as your mother." I stood up. The room was small. Valerie filled the doorway. But I looked straight at her, and something in my face made her take half a step back. "Don't ever talk about my mother again." Valerie's lip curled. "Or what?" "You'll find out Tuesday." She stared at me. I stared back. After 5 seconds, she turned and walked away, heels clicking down the hallway. Tuesday was the day Drayton had scheduled the meeting. Valerie didn't know that yet. She called my mother cold. My mother, who spent her dying year building a fortress around her daughter. Cold. Let me tell you what cold really looks like Tuesday. 10 a.m., the law office of Patricia Drayton, Main Street, Culpeper. I arrived with Aunt June at 9:45. Drayton met us in the hallway. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and her reading glasses were on. She looked like a woman who'd been waiting for this meeting for 18 months. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Yes." "Good. Let me do the talking until I tell you otherwise." Richard and Valerie arrived at 10 sharp. Valerie had dressed for the occasion. Pressed blouse, gold earrings, lipstick. She carried a manila folder under her arm, thick with papers she'd printed from the internet. She walked in like she was attending a business deal she expected to win. Richard looked smaller than usual. He was sweating through his shirt. He kept touching his collar. He shook Drayton's hand at the door and said, "Thank you for meeting with us." Like he was arriving at a job interview he knew he wouldn't pass. The conference room was modest. Oak table, 4 chairs on each side, a window looking out onto the street. A water pitcher sat in the center. Nobody poured a glass. Drayton's file folder, thick, tabbed, held together with a binder clip, sat in front of her like a weapon that hadn't been drawn yet. Valerie chose the seat directly across from Drayton. She set her manila folder on the table and placed both hands on top of it. A power move. She'd probably practiced it. Aunt June and I sat on the opposite side. June was calm. I was calm. We'd both arrived knowing something that Richard and Valerie didn't. This meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a notification. Drayton sat at the head. She arranged her file folder, the real one, the one Claire had built, and looked at each of us in turn. "Thank you all for coming. I called this meeting because there appears to be ongoing confusion about the estate of Claire Ingram. I'd like to resolve that confusion today, clearly and permanently." Valerie smiled, the confident, prepared smile of someone who thinks they've come armed. Richard licked his lips and shifted in his seat. June squeezed my hand under the table. Drayton opened the folder. "I want to be clear about one thing from the start," she said. Her voice carried the careful weight of someone who'd rehearsed nothing because she didn't need to. "I represent the trust of Claire Ingram, not Mr. Ingram, not Mrs. Ingram. The trust. My obligation is to the document Claire created and to its sole beneficiary, her daughter Morgan." She looked at Valerie's manila folder, then back at Valerie. "Let's begin." Drayton read from the trust document the way a surgeon handles a scalpel. Precise, unhurried, and final. Claire Ingram established an irrevocable trust on March 14th, 2 years ago. The trust names me, Patricia Drayton, as sole trustee. The sole beneficiary is Morgan Claire Ingram. The trust contains $400,000 in combined assets. She turned a page. The distribution schedule is as follows. $50,000 released for educational expenses when the beneficiary turns 18. Additional distributions at ages 21 and 25. All disbursements require trustee approval. Valerie leaned forward. "But Richard is her father. He has parental rights." Drayton looked at her the way you'd look at a fly on a courtroom wall. Parental rights do not extend to an irrevocable trust established by a third party. Mr. Ingram is not the grantor, not the trustee, and not a beneficiary. He has no legal standing here. None. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Claire never told me about this. She wasn't required to." Valerie's folder was still closed on her lap. She gripped the edges. "Then we'll get a lawyer. We'll contest this." "You're welcome to retain counsel," Drayton said. "But I should mention something first." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This office received a letter from First National Trust Services dated 3 weeks ago. It documents an unauthorized attempt to access Morgan's trust account." The caller identified herself as Drayton read directly. Valerie Ingram, legal guardian of Morgan Ingram. Valerie's face drained of color. The manila folder in her lap, the one she'd walked in with, was full of internet printouts and homemade legal arguments, suddenly looked very small. "Called the bank?" Richard said. Valerie didn't answer him. "Impersonating a legal guardian to access a minor's protected trust is a serious matter," Drayton said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Potentially a federal one. "I trust this won't happen again." Valerie's hand moved to her throat. She touched her earring. A nervous gesture I'd seen a dozen times at the kitchen table, but never like this. Never with that expression. The expression of someone who'd walked into a room expecting to win and was realizing in real time that the door had locked behind her. Richard leaned back in his chair. He rubbed his face. The petition for guardianship, the conversations with Dean, the Sunday dinner campaign, all of it useless. Every move they'd made had been anticipated by a woman who'd been dead for 6 months. June's hand tightened around mine, and Drayton wasn't done. "There is one additional item," Drayton said. She reached into the folder and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. The one she'd given me weeks ago, the one I'd returned to her that morning because this was the moment. "Claire left a letter. It's addressed to Richard. She asked me to read it aloud in your presence at the appropriate time." Drayton looked at me. I nodded. Richard pushed back from the table. "I don't need to hear. Mom asked for this," I said. "Please." He looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time since I'd moved in. Then he settled back into his chair and folded his hands. Drayton opened the envelope, unfolded the letter, and read, "Richard, if you're hearing this, then what I expected has happened. I'm gone, and someone in your life is trying to take what I left for our daughter." Valerie's jaw tightened. Richard didn't move. "I want you to know I don't hate you. I don't write this with anger. I write it with clarity. I know you, Richard. I've always known you. You're not a bad man. You're a weak one. And weakness, left unchecked, does the same damage as cruelty." Richard's eyes were red. His hands gripped the edge of the table. "I know you'll remarry. I know whoever you choose will look at what I built and see an opportunity. And I know you'll convince yourself that sharing is the right thing because it's easier than fighting for your daughter." Drayton's voice was steady. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock on the wall, June's breath next to me, the creak of Richard's chair as he leaned forward like the words were pulling him in against his will. "No, you'll convince yourself that sharing is the right thing because it's easier than fighting for your daughter. It was always easier for you to agree than to stand. I used to think that was kindness. Now I know it's just another word for cowardice." Richard made a sound, small, involuntary, like someone had pressed on a bruise he'd forgotten was there. "But I'm not writing this to punish you. I'm writing this because our daughter shouldn't have to fight alone. She's strong, Richard. Stronger than you know? Stronger than me, maybe. But she's also 17, and she just lost her mother. And she deserves at least one parent who puts her first." Drayton turned to the final paragraph. Her voice softened, not with sympathy, but with respect. "The way you read someone's last words, when you know they meant every syllable. I couldn't make you into the father she deserved, but I could make sure she'd be okay without one. That's what this trust is. It's not about the money. It's about making sure our daughter has a floor that no one, not you, not whoever comes after me, can pull out from under her." The last line, "Don't be angry at Morgan. Be angry at yourself for making this letter necessary," Reacher broke. He put his face in his hands and he cried. I had never heard that sound from him, not once in 17 years. It was raw and ugly and real. The sound of a man hearing the truth from a woman he'd underestimated his entire life. Valerie stood up, grabbed her folder, and said, "This is ridiculous." She walked out of the room. The door slammed behind her. Aunt June put her arm around me. I held my mother's bracelet and felt the locket press against my pulse. Mom saw everything, even from the other side. I have to stop here for a moment because I know some of you are feeling exactly what I felt sitting in that room. If your parent ever chose someone else over you, if you've ever waited in silence while other people decided what you were worth, I see you. This story isn't over. That letter was the beginning, not the end. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have opened that envelope, or would you have kept it sealed forever? Stay with me because what happened after Valerie walked out of that office is something I never saw coming. The parking lot was empty, except for 3 cars. Richard sat in his truck with the engine off, both hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. I walked over, opened the passenger door, sat down. We didn't speak for a full minute. The truck smelled like coffee and work gloves. A Pine Air freshener hung from the rearview mirror, dried out. Months past useful. "I didn't know she wrote that," he said finally. His voice was, "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't think she'd actually say it." He flinched, small, but I saw it. "I'm not going to fight you, Dad," kept my voice even. "But I'm not giving you Mom's money. It's not mine to give. She put it in trust for a reason. She knew you'd ask, and she made it so the answer would always be no, even if I was too scared to say it myself." He stared through the windshield. His knuckles were white on the wheel. "I'll stay in your house until I turn 18, 7 months. I'll be respectful. I'll clean up after myself. I won't cause problems, but I need you to understand. I'm leaving the day I turn 18, and I'm not coming back." "Where will you go?" "That's not your problem anymore. You made sure of that a long time ago." I opened the door and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my sneakers. "Morgan," I stopped. "Your mother was—" He paused, swallowed. "She was always the stronger one." "I know," I said. I closed the truck door and walked across the parking lot to June's car. I didn't look back. I could feel him watching me, but I didn't turn around. "You had 8 years to be my father. I thought Mom had 2 years left. She used every single day." Ms. Drayton moved fast. By the end of the week, Richard and Valerie each received a certified letter from her office. The language was formal. The message was simple. All communication regarding the Claire Ingram Trust must be directed through the trustee. Any attempt to contact Morgan about financial matters directly through family members or through third parties would be documented and reported. A separate letter went to Valerie specifically. It included a copy of the bank's denial and a note. "No further legal action will be taken at this time regarding the unauthorized inquiry. However, this documentation has been filed and preserved." Valerie knew what that meant. One more step, and she'd be explaining herself to someone with a badge. The following Saturday, I sat in Drayton's office and signed the beneficiary acknowledgement, a form confirming I understood the trust terms, the distribution schedule, and my rights. $50,000 for education at 18, a second release at 21, the remainder at 25, all managed by Drayton until then. "Your mother spent a lot of time on this," Drayton said, watching me sign. "She rewrote the distribution clause 3 times. She wanted to make sure you'd have enough to start, but not so much that you'd stop building. That sounds like her." Drayton smiled for the first time since I'd met her. It was brief, but real. She also left a note in the file. Not a legal document, just a sticky note in her handwriting. It says, "Tell Morgan I'm proud of her, even if she doesn't need to hear it." I pressed my pen against the table, breathed in, breathed out. "She was wrong about that," I said. "I really needed to hear it. Your mother didn't just leave you money, Morgan. She left you a wall, and nobody was getting through it." The story traveled the way stories do in small towns, fast, crooked, and without permission. Uncle Dean told the truth first. He called Grandma Shirley the same evening as the lawyers' meeting and laid it out. The trust was airtight. Valerie had impersonated a legal guardian to access a minor's account, and Richard had asked Dean to find loopholes to break into his own daughter's inheritance. Shirley called Richard that night. I was in my room, but the walls in that house were thin, and Shirley's voice carried even through a phone speaker. "You let that woman try to steal from your child." I couldn't hear Richard's response, just the low murmur of a man who'd run out of excuses. Aunt Linda called me the next afternoon. Her tone was different from the last time. Softer, smaller. "Morgan, I owe you an apology. I didn't know the full story. Valerie told us." "Well, she told us something very different." "I'm sorry. Thank you, Aunt Linda." "Your Uncle Dean, he set us straight. He told us what really happened about the bank, about the petition. I appreciate him. He's a good man. Better than his brother, if I'm being honest." She paused. "Listen, Morgan. Whatever you need, if you ever need anything, you call me. Okay?" "Okay. Thank you, Aunt Linda. Aunt Morgan, your mother. I wish I'd known her. She sounds like someone worth knowing." By the following Sunday, Valerie was no longer invited to Shirley's dinner table. The invitation went to Richard alone. He didn't come. He said he had to work. Everyone knew he didn't work Sundays. Shirley called me that week. She didn't mention money. She didn't mention the trust. She just asked how school was going and told me she'd saved a piece of her apple cobbler for me if I ever wanted to stop by. It was the first normal conversation I'd had with my grandmother. It shouldn't have taken a legal crisis to get there, but it did. The family didn't collapse overnight. It shifted like a house settling after a storm. Cracks in the foundation that had always been there, finally visible. Shirley still loved her son. Linda still answered his calls. But the trust they'd placed in his judgment was gone. And Valerie's name had become the thing people lowered their voices to say. Dean checked in on me by text every couple of weeks. Short messages. "How's the library? Need anything?" From a man who wasn't used to talking much but was trying to show up in the ways he could, I didn't celebrate any of this. There's no victory in watching a family come apart, even one that was never fully mine. The house got quieter after the meeting. Not peaceful, just emptier. Richard and Valerie fought behind their bedroom door. I could hear the rhythm, if not the words. Valerie's voice rising sharp and fast. Richard's dropping slow and flat. The arguments always ended the same way. A door slamming, then the television turning on too loud. One night about 3 weeks after the meeting, I passed the kitchen and heard Valerie on the phone. She was talking to her own mother, and she wasn't performing anymore. The mask was off. "He's useless," she said. "He can't even get money from his own kid. I married him because I thought he had potential. Turns out his dead wife was the one with the plan." I stood in the hallway, perfectly still. She laughed. A harsh, short sound. I should have looked at the finances before the wedding. My mistake. She hung up. I walked back to my room before she saw me. That night I understood something about Valerie that I hadn't before. Richard wasn't a partner to her. He was an investment that failed to pay off. She'd calculated the return, and now that the numbers didn't work, she was cutting her losses. Richard, meanwhile, retreated. He came home from work, ate in front of the TV, and went to bed. He stopped asking me about the trust. He stopped asking me anything at all. Around 11 that night, Brianna knocked on my door. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." She leaned against the doorframe. "For what it's worth, I think your mom sounds like an amazing person." I looked at her. This girl who'd been dragged into a mess she didn't create by a mother she couldn't control. "She was," I said. "She really was." Brianna nodded. And for one small moment in that ugly house, something gentle happened between us. 7 months passed the way tough months do. Slowly on the inside, fast on the calendar. I kept my head down. I went to school. I worked at the library. I studied for the SATs at that same back table by the window and scored a 1,380. "Good enough," Mrs. Cooper said. To make my mother very proud. I applied to Virginia Commonwealth University and got in. Half scholarship for academic merit, the rest covered by the Trust's education fund. I signed the dorm contract the week I turned 18, during those 7 months. Valerie and I developed an unspoken agreement. We avoided each other. She stopped mentioning the Trust. She stopped mentioning my mother. She barely acknowledged me at all, which was a relief compared to the alternative. Richard drifted through the house like a man, sleepwalking through his own life. Present at meals, absent in every way that mattered. Kyle grew quieter around me too. I never knew if Dean had said something to Richard about the bullying or if Kyle just got bored. Either way, the water glass was the last of it. Brianna and I exchanged small moments. A nod in the hallway. A shared eye roll when Valerie raised her voice. A whispered "good luck" on the morning of my SATs. We never talked about the Trust again. We didn't need to. Drayton released the first $50,000 on my 18th birthday. I opened my own bank account. My name, my signature, no one else's. The teller asked if I wanted to add a parent or guardian. I said no. The morning I left, I packed the same 2 suitcases I'd arrived with. Plus the wooden box with Mom's things in the journal, dried now. The ink faded in places, but still readable. Everything I owned fit in 2 bags. That used to make me sad. Now it made me light. Richard stood at the front door. He was holding a cup of coffee, and he looked older than 45. The fight had gone out of him months ago. If it had ever really been there, Morgan. I stopped on the front step, suitcase in each hand. I know I don't have the right to say this, but good luck. I looked at him. My father, the man who left my mother, who let his wife try to steal my inheritance, who never once in 7 months said the words, "I'm sorry," standing in the doorway of a house that was too big for him now, holding a coffee he'd forget to finish. Dad. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but nothing came. The words were stuck somewhere between his pride and his shame, and neither one would let go. I walked to Aunt June's car, loaded my bags, and got in. June put her hand on mine and said, "Ready?" She pulled out of the driveway. I watched the house shrink in the side mirror. I didn't slam any doors. I just closed them quietly, the way my mother would have. My dorm room at VCU was 8 feet by 12 feet. A single bed, a desk, a closet that fit for hangers. It was the most beautiful room I'd ever seen. I hung Mom's photo on the wall above my desk, the one from my 6th birthday, her arms around me, both of us laughing at something the camera didn't catch. I set the wooden box on my nightstand, and I put on her bracelet every morning like a ritual. College was ordinary in the best way. Classes, dining hall, food, a roommate named Tessa who played music too loud and apologized every time. I declared English as my major because writing was the only thing that made me feel close to Mom. And she'd always said the world needed more people who could tell the truth clearly. I joined the campus literary magazine, wrote a personal essay for my freshman composition class about trust, the legal kind and the human kind. My professor wrote in the margin, "This is publication ready." I didn't submit it anywhere. The story wasn't finished yet. Aunt June drove down from Culpeper once a month with Tupperware containers of food and gossip I didn't ask for, but always appreciated. She'd sit on my dorm bed and tell me stories about Mom as a teenager. How Claire once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring June's forgotten science project to school. How Claire had applied to law school before choosing education instead. She would have been a terrifying lawyer, June said once, laughing. But she liked kids more than courtrooms. Drayton sent quarterly trust statements. Clean, professional, exactly what Mom would have wanted. Each one came with a brief, handwritten note. Investments performing well, no irregularities. Once your mother would be proud of your grades. Drayton never overstepped. She was the trustee, not a grandmother. But the notes mattered more than she probably knew. And then, in November, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "Thank you." It was from Brianna. "Hi, Morgan. I got into Piedmont Community College. I'm paying my own way. Loans, work study, tips from the diner. I'm not going to lie, it's hard. But I wanted you to know I'm glad you didn't give in. If you had, my mom would have spent that money in a year, and I'd still be in the same place. At least this way, I know what I'm earning is mine. Thank you for not caving." I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and looked at Mom's photo. "Your trust didn't just protect my money, Mom. It protected futures you never even imagined." The handwritten letter arrived 6 months after I left. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting, blocky, slightly tilted to the left. My father's penmanship. Hadn't changed since the birthday cards he stopped sending when I was 10. I opened it. Standing in the mail room of my dorm, next to a recycling bin and a bulletin board, covered in flyers for campus events. Not a dramatic setting. But life doesn't always arrange itself for the camera. The letter was short, 1 page, front only. "Morgan, I read your mother's letter again last night, 3rd time this month. She was right about everything." I was weak. I am weak. I let Valerie decide things that were mine to decide, and I let you carry the cost of that. I'm sorry I wasn't the father your mother described. I'm trying to figure out how to be better. I started seeing someone, a counselor. Valerie and I separated in October. She took the kids and moved to her mother's place in Richmond. The house is quiet now. Too quiet. I don't expect you to believe any of this. I don't expect you to write back, but I wanted you to know that I heard your mother finally. Too late, probably, but I heard her. He signed it, Dad. I stood in the mailroom for a long time. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. A girl from the third floor came in, grabbed a package, and left without noticing me. Life has a way of moving around grief like water around a rock. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, and not because I didn't believe him. I think I did, partly. The counseling, the separation, the rereading of my mother's letter. Those sounded like the actions of a man who was finally doing the work he should have started a decade ago. But forgiveness isn't something you hand over on demand. It's something you grow into slowly, like a garden you plant without knowing when anything will bloom. I wasn't ready. Maybe I would be next year, or the year after that. Maybe I'd sit across from him at a diner someday and let him buy me coffee and we'd talk about ordinary things. Maybe not. I took the letter home, folded it neatly, and placed it inside the wooden box right next to Mom's bracelet and the birthday card. She wrote me when I turned 15. I didn't throw it away. That meant something. I just wasn't sure what yet. It's spring now. The trees outside my dorm window are coming back to life. The way things do when you give them enough time and enough light. I'm sitting at my desk, Mom's photo in front of me, her bracelet warm against my wrist. The locket is open. 4-year-old me grins up from her lap, unaware of everything that's coming. I close it gently. My mother didn't teach me to fight. She taught me something harder. She taught me to prepare. She taught me that some battles don't need shouting or lawyers in expensive suits or revenge fantasies played out in public. They need a woman with a legal pad and a clear head sitting at her sister's kitchen table, building a fortress the daughter wouldn't need 4 years if someone in your life tells you that. Loving your family means handing over what's yours. That's not love. That's control wearing a mask. You don't owe anyone your inheritance. You don't owe anyone your boundaries. And you absolutely don't owe anyone your silence. My mom couldn't be here to protect me in person. So, she put it in writing. She put it in a trust with a lock that couldn't be picked. She put it in a letter that said everything I wasn't old enough to say myself. And that was enough. I open my laptop. I start typing. I'm telling this story because my mother can't. And because somewhere out there, someone is sitting at a kitchen table being told that family means giving up what they're owed. It doesn't. It never did. My name is Morgan Ingram. I'm 18 now. I have my mother's bracelet, my mother's trust, and my mother's spine. And for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where she wanted me to be. That's my story. If it reached you, if you've ever had to hold your ground when the people who were supposed to protect you told you to sit down, drop a comment and tell me what boundary did you set that changed your life. And if you want another story with this same energy, I've linked one in the description. It's about a woman whose in-laws tried to take her business. Different battle, same fire. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you for staying until the end.